Hey everybody, this is Greg Reffner with the Abstract Podcast. Super excited to have Taylor Scotto with us today. He is the head of sales development, strategic accounts, and growth at Cloudinary. We're going to be talking about building a tech stack for global SDR teams. Taylor, please say hi, man.
Hey, Greg. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the time today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to dive into this topic with you because obviously here at Abstract, we love technology. So really excited to get your perspective on things. It always helps, Taylor, that our listeners have kind of a foundation or basis of understanding for the experience that our guests bring to the table as it relates to the topics they're talking about. So you started your career in sales development at LinkedIn 8 or 9 years ago, if my math is right. I want to dive in a little bit about that. Like, what did your tech stack look like? What tools did you have available to you? Not too long ago, in the world of sales development?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. I think to date myself a little bit, I've had a wealth of different experiences, which has been very helpful. So I even did sales dev for banking for a few years, retail banking before SaaS sales. And then I was fortunate enough to be able to work on the sales dev team at LinkedIn to really see what sales dev at high velocity looks like and excellence, which we can definitely talk about later. And then from there, I've joined a number of different startups from Series A through Series D. And now I'm working at Cloudinary, which is a fully bootstrapped company, which is really exciting. Sold HR tech, as I mentioned, banking, and then now API-based and cloud-based solutions for a marketing and engineering team. So I've done, HR tools, IT tools, so very exciting, and continue to learn every day. So
that's awesome. So with that experience comes obviously different experiences at those companies. So, we're going to talk about the future of the tech stack and what you're doing right now. But what did the tools that SDRs had available to them look like, when you first started, right? I'm guessing the tech stack was a little bit different 9 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think, when I was at a bank, for example, like I just graduated college around 2010. So, the tools we had there was basically CRM, basic CRM, and a phone, right? Now it was finance, so that's going to be a different motion, right? I didn't have to do any research or anything like that, but that was basically what we had.
Okay.
You did have a headset, which was very, very cool. And then at LinkedIn, same thing. It was we used Hoovers as our database.
Okay. I don't even know what that is.
Yeah, it's an older database that people use to look up
tech
information, and even then, I think the goal was between $60 and $100 a day, but people would pick up, right? And then LinkedIn was still a new thing, so not new itself, but they would respond to in-mails and emails. So I think the velocity of sales dev was picking up.
Yeah.
And then from there, I really got to see, we had a whole sales ops team, so they were scrubbing data. We had really clean data there. So I was fortunate. I mean, LinkedIn really has a superb and excellent culture when it comes to process and great talent and how to think about it. But then I, wanted to get into startups, and that's when I got slapped in the face thinking that I knew everything about social selling. But it's different, social selling is still it's a tremendous strategy. It just looks slightly different, especially when no one knows who you are, right? So the sales dev motion or prospecting motion is completely different.
Yeah.
So learning your messaging and all that. But when you're at a startup, oftentimes you don't have the same tools or brand name, right? So it's really scrappy, right? So very different.
Scrappy is a good word to describe it. Well, let's dive into something you kind of just talked about a little bit, is kind of the culture. And we were talking about that as we were getting ready for our podcast, Taylor. In your experience, you've been an individual contributor at SDR level, and now you're leading a global sales team across many different organizations. Talk to me about how different companies treat sales development teams and treat sales development leadership flexibility you're given or not given, like, is there a clear difference kind of from org to org in terms of like what flexibility you're given to kind of run your segment of the business and from a sales development standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really valid point. And I can only speak from my experience, but it's night and day depending on where you are. I've had it where I know we were talking about this earlier, but you're kind of told, here's a strategy. We make all the decisions, and we'll let you know like what that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Where you have no kind of authority or even like advisorship on helping advise the business. And then I've had it where, hey, like, what do you think? But we'll still make all the decisions. And then I'm really fortunate where I'm at now, Cloudinary. They really trust their leadership team and provide that ability to share what you're thinking and actually influence the strategy. So I've really seen what that looks like in all three experiences. And then especially as the tech has changed so much in the past 10 years, it's really important because we've never seen so many tools today for just prospecting. I mean, it's insane. So
Yeah.
even in the last 3 years.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. The proliferation or saturation, whatever language we want to use there to describe like the sales enablement landscape.
Right.
And so with your firsthand of experience of being an SDR, moving into leadership, I think it's so important for like, even like a VP of sales to know what it's like to carry a bag or a quota, right? As a sales development leader, it's so important that you've been on the phone, 100 phone calls a day. You've tried social selling. You've had to craft emails. So you understand where the gaps are in the process. What resources, what groups do you participate in? Like, how do you stay ahead of the curve for your team in knowing what's out there in the market that could potentially fill those gaps, address those pain points that your team may not even have a way to describe yet? Like maybe they don't know that it hurts that much yet because they have no way of knowing how to define that pain.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think I'm still learning how to answer that one. The biggest one I would say is, conversations like this, right? Just hearing about different tools. It's actually allocating time to do that. But a lot of it's from conversations with other SDR leaders about what they're doing, what are they seeing successful, how are they tackling certain challenges, and they'll oftentimes bring up, we're using this or that to help. They like it, they don't like it, but it's usually through the conversations. Of course, there's outbound tactics. Every once in a while, there'll be a really good email to take a look at, and it'll be timely because you're really feeling that pain. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but a lot of it's usually through the conversations of other SDR leaders.
Got it. Okay. I love that. Right. So that peer-to-peer feedback, right? Kind of leaning on what other people are doing. What new technologies have you come across lately that you kind of get excited about when you think about the possibilities for your team?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that I've been excited about is the idea of, automation. So that includes like machine learning, AI, and building that technology into a new software, which is pretty mind-blowing compared to what it was like, only 5 or 6 years ago.
Totally.
And also what's really exciting is where marketing tools have come in such a long way, really around intent data. So how do we not just throw, spaghetti at the wall and sees what sticks and say, hey, I want to go after these accounts because, they look like our customers and that's a good enough strategy. Well, today it's like, there's so much more that the tools can do now that give you, hey, these are the accounts that are showing interest in research and actually looking at the buying something. So these are going to be good accounts, but these are better and they're in the market, right? So it's accelerating your motion. And as a sales dev leader, it's like, it's always important to know that, but I didn't really know that these types of tools existed, right? It changes your whole strategy in a good way.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we used to have like marketing automation, which would give us lead scoring, right? Kind of give a basic understanding of the level of interest. But then you combine that data with like Bombora or Zoom Info Insights, and all of a sudden it's like you're starting to form this holistic picture of really what your target account list should be when you're combining individual behaviors from your prospects plus organizational like insights into what they're searching for online, things like that. It's kind of like cheating in a way, right? Like how do you not win when you basically are able to tell like who's waving their hand saying, I want help, I need help around this issue?
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty incredible to be able to map out your whole account strategy. And that's also, I think, helping sales development leaders as a whole show up in a different light than just, continuing to elevate the organization and companies.
Totally. Well, let's say you come across a new tool in kind of our pre-podcast preparation. Taylor, I think you mentioned a tool called Orem. Let's say you come across a tool like that. How do you go about the process of going, is this good for my team? Like, walk me through the steps that you take as a sales development leader to really hone in on, yes, this is going to be a good fit. Here's my ROI I think I'm going to get. Here's how I define that. Kind of walk us through that.
Yeah. I mean, I think the first thing is, and I've definitely learned a lot, but I have a lot more to learn. But when I first started managing, it was like, hey, this is a cool tool, let's get it. And that's not how it works. You really got to be sold on it, but then run the numbers, right? And oftentimes, I think if I were to advise myself like 5 or 6 years ago, if you don't have the data, assume a certain number, and that way you can build out your models where it's like, all right, this new tool gives me, 2 times more dials per rep, or 4 times, whatever the tool is. But let's say it's a dialing tool. Then it's like, all right, how many dials do we make a day? I don't know. Well, make up a number for now, because once you have that model, you can bring that up to your, finance team or your ops team and say, okay, here's a model, but I clearly don't have all the data. Can you help me out? And that way, my biggest gap early on was not building the model because I didn't have the data, right? And so I would just not have it. But a better solution is do it anyway, or assume these numbers so you can finish, hey, if we did X, we can get Y. Now you've got something to show your team, but also, hey, is this even viable?
Yeah.
But a lot of times the gap is, how did we think this through and how this impacts the organization? And then, even today, it's like, where do these tools fit into our strategy? We also seem to miss that part because we often forget not everyone is in sales dev. They might have, notions of what we do, but they don't really know. And they don't know these tools like we do. So I think we forget that, we need to communicate. Here's how this tool works. Even if it seems mundane, it's just making sure this is where it is. This is how it fits into our strategy. Mm-hmm. And this is the impact that it can have.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I love about B2B software is if you have the data, it's pretty easy to quantify the impact that it could have. Like, let's say you're typically making 100 phone calls a day and your connect rate is 10%. Your conversion rate of those connects is 50%. And you have a tool that can double the amount of dials you have, right? You just took your 100 phone calls and 10 conversations and 5 meetings to 200 phone calls, 20 conversations and 10 meetings. And then it's becoming, okay, how do we move the needle on the connect to conversion rate? What can we do there? And so it's, I think if you have that data and you have those metrics, that's what I love about B2B software, man. It's so easy to really figure out if there's something to be had in that solution that you're evaluating. How often do you bring like your team into the conversation when you're looking at new tools?
I mean, in my experience, like Cloudinary is big enough now where we've got a management team. So this is new for me. Typically, I've just kind of been the SDR leader at the org. And so it's exciting because I get to talk about sales dev with other leaders who get it.
Yeah.
And it's, you get to kind of like A/B test the idea and just say like, hey, what do you think of this?
Mhm.
And, XYZ. And that way you can vet out, hey, is this worth bringing up? Because you don't want to bring up every tool that you see that's shiny and
You get shiny red ball syndrome, and
yeah.
yeah,
It's the other thing I've learned is, when you have an ask, but it's making sure that is timing right, and is it going to move the needle big enough where you're on the line for it. So
totally.
confident in it at least.
Yeah. So let's kind of expand globally a little bit. So you guys have a global team at Cloudinary. Are there? I've never ran a global SDR team, Taylor. So I'm really curious. Like, is the tool sets, are they different? Are the needs different based upon region of the world? Culturally, are there expectations of how things should be done that are different? Like, I'd love to kind of hear your perspective and your experience at Cloudinary and just working with global sales development teams.
Well, I won't have that much on that one because I'm still learning that as well. I will say, from my limited experience, there are some nuances, right? And so, like for example, messaging is a big deal. The
Okay.
way you communicate in different parts of the world is very different and can come off very abrasive or disrespectful. But the way you approach that, and I think that's for those that have come from like the US side of things and moving into that is something to take note of.
So if I'm building out a cadence in my sales engagement tool, or I'm writing playbooks or battle cards, right, I have to be conscious that it's not a one size fits all. I can't take my, North American, US based email template and expect it to work in Japan or expect it to work in Germany, right? So maybe it's not necessarily the tech, and this seems like common sense, but as we all know, common sense isn't as common as we would hope it would be. And so, yeah, you might need to make different cadences for regions of the world based upon cultural norms or communication styles.
Exactly.
Yeah. So interesting. Well, I want to get into kind of your advice, right? Relatively new into the world of sales development leadership compared to some folks that have been in there maybe 15, 20 years. But I know we talk to a lot of people every day that are SDRs looking to become Taylor one day. And they maybe want to get their hands on being able to influence a decision around technology, or they're being tasked with, hey, we have a gap, go find a solution. What would be maybe 3 of your biggest pieces of advice for SDRs who are getting into this world or want to get into this world where they're making decisions that are influencing things like the tech stack, messaging, go-to-market strategy via sales development?
Yeah, I mean, if the question is the question around if SDRs want to get into leadership?
Yeah, let's focus on SDRs. Yeah.
Sure. So the biggest thing as an SDR is you want to show your work, right? And oftentimes we just assume everyone knows what we're doing, and it's obvious. But if we don't have it written out and it's clearly spelt out, here's my strategy, here's the impact, it's not going to get approved. But more importantly, it helps you really map out your thinking so that it's clear for anyone that looks at the presentation, that you have all the data that you need and that it's thought out, right? I mean, the biggest thing is this thought out or not?
Got it.
The second thing I would say is like, really get buy-in. And so I didn't know this first off as a manager. It's not like, here's my plan and this is how we're going to get approved. And then when you get pushback, it's like, oh, I guess it wasn't a good idea. A better approach is, you create your plan and think, how is this tool going to help? But the biggest learning was like, go to every business unit that this is going to impact and say, hey, what do you think of this? Here's the numbers, but what do you think? And have people buy in. And I think that was a big learning for me a few years ago.
Okay.
So if it's sales ops, if the tool touches any type of Salesforce or any integrations, you need them to say, hey, what do you think? You want IT buy-in, like, what do you think? Is this going to take a long time to build out or onboard? Enablement, hey, how long do you think it would take to train? And that way you're going to have people buy in, and also change it so that, hey, communicate it this way. Right? Or, hey, this isn't good timing, but there's actually a bigger initiative next quarter or in a few quarters that this will tie into. Let's frame it around that.
Nice.
So you're just getting the support, I call it support, but the help you need to get that project finalized, and then you finally have something. So it's not like hey, tell us what you think, and that's the plan. It's usually, it takes most of the business partners buy-in to make sure that it aligns.
Love that. I love that. So it's so interesting as we've been kind of going to market with Abstract. One thing that I never thought in my wildest dreams was that sales development leaders would bring in like the product management team or the product marketing team. And, they were really looking for that buy-in, right? This is new. This is something different for them. And so it's so true. And I've seen it just kind of played out with our customers where sales development leaders are pulling in ops, they're pulling in product, they're pulling in customer success to kind of get everybody saying yes with them,
right?
As opposed to just going kind of rogue, as I like to call it. So I think it's really a smart idea to get that buy-in. So Taylor, this has been awesome, man. I really do appreciate your time today. I definitely, one thing that, again, to me should have been common sense in my mind, but I'm kind of kicking myself that it's not something that's been more top of mind, is just this idea that messaging needs to change based upon where we are in the world and who we're talking to. And I kind of feel hang my head in shame in the fact that that's not something that was just more like, that shouldn't have been a surprise to me. So thank you for that reminder, Taylor. I do appreciate it. Taylor, if anybody wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
LinkedIn is great.
Okay.
And then, yeah.
Cool. So
there,
Taylor Scotto, Scotto. And so Taylor, any final words to our listeners before we part ways today?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, one of the questions I think that we didn't dive into too deeply, but, looking at tools that really have AI and machine learning tied to it, especially today. I mean, who would have thought that we'd be 2 years into a global pandemic, and it has changed, right? And it's made our jobs in many ways more challenging and other ways more lenient. Yeah. But it's changed, right? And so making sure that we're successful wherever we are in the world is really important, and that's going to be a new focus for leaders, right? Especially if people don't always go back to the office every day. So that oversight, or at least transparency, will really help.
Yeah. Leverage the advancements in technology to make up some of the kind of, I don't even call them gaps, but right, like it was a lot easier to do things when everybody was in an office. And driving cultural change, driving in a new initiative, leverage the data, leverage technology to expedite the rate of driving that change when maybe your SDRs are spread out all across the country and it's not necessarily as easy to get them all in the same room.
Exactly.
Right? So leverage the technology that's being built today. I love that. It's a great point. Well, on that note, Taylor, awesome, man. Really appreciate your insights. Keep kicking ass. And thank you for your time today.
All right, great. Thank you.